For the past half a century, an ancient army of warriors has been quietly conquering the world. Wherever small battalions of China's famous terracotta warriors are exhibited, they win over a new legion of fans.
For decades, China's Terracotta Army has captivated the world. Thousands of clay soldiers guarding the tomb of a powerful emperor.
Tomb of the first emperor is part of this pattern. It is also a pyramid. It has also not been excavated. The Terracotta Army around it has been found.
The Terracotta Army is amazing.
Oh, yeah.
But a newly uncovered warrior has sparked global intrigue. This figure carries a secret that could challenge official history and shake the foundations of Chinese archaeology. Why is the emperor's tomb still sealed? Why are experts treading carefully? And what is the Chinese government trying to keep buried? This isn't just another artifact. It's a key to understanding an empire built on control and mystery. What lies beneath the surface may change how we see ancient China forever. The accidental empire beneath the soil. It began with an accident, one that would change the course of archaeological history. In 1974, a group of farmers in Xi'an, China, set out to dig a well during a drought. Their goal was water. What they found instead were fragments of something ancient, something no one was prepared for. A hardened clay ear, a carved mustache, the folds of armor, all emerging from beneath the dry soil. At first, they thought they had uncovered broken pottery or ruins, but as more pieces surfaced, it became clear they were standing atop a hidden world. The Chinese government quickly dispatched archaeologists to investigate. What they unearthed stunned the world. A subterranean army of life-sized warriors arranged in exact military formations. The figures stood in tight rows, shoulder to shoulder, facing east, as though waiting for a battle that never came. Their purpose? To protect the first emperor of unified China, Qin Shi Huang, in his afterlife. But even that explanation felt incomplete. These statues were not like other burial artifacts. They weren't symbolic or hastily crafted. They were meticulous, disturbingly human. Every one of the warriors had a distinctive expression, face structure, and posture. Some looked quite fierce, while others had a serene appearance. The marks on their clothes, hairstyles, and even the veins in their hands were carved to shed astonishment to the viewer. There was no way for two to seem alike. Initially, experts made assumptions that this feature was installed for aesthetic purposes. But as they kept digging deeper, the irregularities began to pile high. The individuality of each figure told about some much deeper things, probably even as to what it meant concerning the representation of real people. Were these statues reconstructed after the actual soldiers of Qin? Or were they meant to frighten opponents even in the afterlife? Beyond the warriors, horses with chariots, archers, and infantry were all arranged with some strategic intention beyond the historical display. One pit showcased cavalry forces clustered up for a flanking maneuver. Another pit featured an archer in combat-ready formation. Higher-ranking figures were suggested in the command structure based on their placement within central or protected positions. Nothing was random. Even the distance between the soldiers and the outer walls followed patterns consistent with battlefield planning. The Terracotta Army appeared to not just be some beautiful art, but rather a strategy in clay. In the years that went by, excavations uncovered other pits, some with finds of musicians, acrobats, and court officials, while others received paid offerings of ever-so-realistic, elaborately designed weapons, many of bronze and fitted for the hands of the warriors. Remarkably, some of these weapons were still sharp after being preserved for more than 2,000 years. The artistry was meant to be actual action. Qin Shi Huang expected his army to fight in death. A realm of mystery surrounded that worker, an unremittingly huge mound, which is thought to contain the tomb of the emperor and is sealed off. The Terracotta Army stands encasing this mound like mighty guards in a security perimeter. For decades, the world thought it understood that message. The Terracotta Army was a marvel of ancient engineering, a tribute to a powerful ruler, a symbol of immortality. But that narrative was about to shift. Because in late 2024, buried within one of the lesser explored pits, a single figure would emerge, unlike any seen before. The emperor who would rule forever. At the heart of the Terracotta Army's mystery stands one man, Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China. Ruthless, visionary, and obsessed with power, he wasn't content to merely rule in life. He wanted to rule forever. His ambitions shaped one of the most extraordinary burial complexes in human history. A sprawling underground empire designed to extend his dominance into the afterlife. Qin Shi Huang wasn't born an emperor. He rose from the throne of the Qin state in the Warring States period, a time marked by endless bloodshed between rival kingdoms. Through relentless warfare, diplomacy, and calculated brutality, he conquered all 6 rival states by the age of 38. In 221 BCE, he declared himself the first emperor of China, a title no one had dared claim before. He wasn't just uniting land, he was forging an identity, a new order from chaos, and that identity would not die with him. His rule was marked by radical reform and authoritarian control. He standardized currency, weights, and measures across the empire. He commissioned vast road systems and began the initial construction of what would become the Great Wall of China. But these advancements came at a terrible cost. His projects demanded hundreds of thousands of workers, many of them peasants, prisoners, or conscripted soldiers. And many of them never returned home. Laborers died in droves, constructing the emperor's visions, buried in the same earth they shaped. None of these undertakings, however, matched the scale or secrecy of his most personal project, his tomb. Historical texts, especially those written by court historian Sima Qian, described the burial site as an elaborate subterranean world. It was said to mirror the empire above ground, complete with palaces, rivers, constellations, and intricate landscapes. But the most haunting detail? Those rivers were made not of water, but of flowing mercury. At the time, this sounded like a myth. But modern soil tests around the burial mound have revealed abnormal concentrations of mercury, lending frightening credibility to ancient accounts. Qin Shi Huang's dreams of eternal dominion went beyond building constructions alone. He sent expeditions searching for the elixir of life. Legend has it that he was so terrified by death that he drank potions made from mercury, thought he could cut off the spiral of death, and ironically, became poisoned by them. He slept further into the grave with more assurance than he had in life, presaging the passing of his empire beyond death. To build an underground kingdom, he ordered the construction of the Terracotta Army. But this wasn't a symbolic gesture. It was military insurance. The soldiers are not displayed, but were laid out in strategic battle formations. Every pit served a purpose. Infantry guarded the front lines. Archers protected the flanks. Command units were buried at central points, reinforcing the sense of hierarchy. This was an army prepared for war on Earth or beyond. Even more disturbingly, ancient chronicles suggest that they sealed many of the artisans and workers who built the tomb inside just to prevent them from telling its secrets. For centuries, these rumors were dismissed as folklore. Yet, they have gained currency as more elaborate and hidden sections of the site are found. If even half the ancient accounts are true, then buried beneath that hill is much more than a tomb. It is a fortress, a trap, a last statement of a man who feared vulnerability above anything else. Every inch of the terracotta complex tells of Qin Shi Huang's desire to control life, death, and his legacy. Through clay and soil, his paranoia, brilliance, and brutality live on. Yet, for over 2,000 years, the world has only known what he wanted them to see. A perfectly ordered army standing sentry over a sealed tomb. That illusion would begin to unravel with one unexpected discovery. A warrior unlike the rest, who hinted that even the emperor's control may not have been as absolute as we once believed. The discovery no one expected. For decades, the Terracotta Army seemed like a finished story. Rows upon rows of silent soldiers, meticulously crafted, eternally vigilant, an archaeological marvel and a window into the mind of China's first emperor. Scholars studied the formations, catalogued the styles, and debated meanings. It was a magnificent puzzle that felt close to solved. But in the final days of 2024, everything changed with the unearthing of a single figure, one that shattered assumptions and rewrote the rules of what we thought we knew. The find came from Pit 2, one of the lesser-known excavation zones at the Terracotta site near Xi'an. Unlike the densely packed foot soldiers and chariots of Pit 1, Pit 2 had always hinted at more strategic arrangements: archers, cavalry units, and military specialists. Excavations in that area were delicate and methodical, moving inch by inch through ancient soil. No one expected something revolutionary to emerge. But just days before the end of the year, a glimmer of elaborately etched clay peeked through the dirt. At first, it looked like a typical upper torso, an armored warrior, nothing new. But something was off. The carving on the breastplate was far more ornate than any previously discovered. Fine ridges lined the shoulders, with faint traces of red pigment still clinging to the grooves, suggesting it had once been painted in deep, commanding colors. The posture was different too. The arm was raised, frozen in mid-command, as if issuing orders to the troops nearby. As the team unearthed more of the figure, the clues added up fast. This was not a common soldier. This was a commander, possibly the first one ever discovered. His presence in the pit rewrote everything experts believed about the site's organization. Until this point, it was thought that generals or high-ranking figures weren't sculpted as part of the army's layout, or at least hadn't survived. The terracotta soldiers were seen as generic representations of infantry, mass-produced, to fill the emperor's afterlife ranks. Quite the opposite. This warrior fit no stereotype. The armor design is certainly one of a kind. The craftsmanship is breathtaking, and his position in relation to two nearby chariots suggests authority. Far from being buried with other commanding figures in Pit 3, which many consider the headquarters of the army, this commander stands near the flanking units, probably in command of a division of cavalry. This deviation raises stunning questions. Were commanders embedded throughout the pits for operational control of units with real tactical structure? Was this a fully modeled military hierarchy hidden beneath the fields? Historians and archaeologists quickly came in with their opinions. Some suggested this may not be a mere symbolic figure, but the true likeness of a real person immortalized in clay. Did the emperor's court designate specific leaders for preservation by literally casting them into the immortal afterlife? If so, the implications are enormous. The Terracotta Army was not merely an honorary guard, it was an actual rehearsal of real command structures, perhaps even a commemorative listing of people who did exist. The timing of the discovery made it even more shocking. More than 30 years had passed since any new major warrior had been unearthed. The majority believed that the pits had given up their largest secrets. A moment when interest in the site was waning. A very moment, this figure appeared. Curiosity was sparked again, and every possible layout of the pits was re-examined. Every position of the warrior, every possible detail discarded before. What else might have been missed? What other people are left unknown, whose stories could have been concealed behind what we thought were standard molds? Still, one question lingered louder than the rest. If one commander lay hidden in plain sight for 2,000 years, what else could be buried just beneath our feet, waiting to disrupt everything we thought we knew about this empire of clay? A system, not just a statue. At first glance, the terracotta warriors appear to be statues, elaborate, hauntingly lifelike, and masterfully constructed. Yes, but statues nonetheless. Silent figures arranged in military formation, eternally guarding the tomb of their emperor. But as archaeologists and researchers probed deeper into the layout, craftsmanship, and positioning of the warriors, a startling realization began to take shape. This wasn't merely a symbolic tribute to power. It was a system, deliberate, coded, and complex. The newly discovered commander in Pit 2 was just the beginning. His ornate armor, commanding posture, and precise location opened the door to a radically different interpretation of the Terracotta Army. That every figure, from infantry to general, was a calculated piece in a grander mechanism. This wasn't random artistry or ceremonial excess. It was a three-dimensional blueprint of a functioning military hierarchy, one that mirrored the real-world operations of an empire obsessed with control. Each pit told a story. Pit 1, the largest and most well-known, held rank-and-file soldiers arranged in tightly packed battle formations, clearly modeled on battlefield tactics. Their armor and weapon styles varied depending on their rank and role. Archers crouched in realistic shooting stances, infantry stood ready for close combat, and chariot units were flanked by guards. This was not a decorative tableau, it was a martial structure, a frozen war room laid out in clay and earth. Pit 2, where the commander was found, revealed even deeper layers. The placement of cavalry and flanking units, the spatial separation of various divisions, and now the embedded high-ranking figure all pointed to a clear intention: to create a scalable command system, possibly even one used in real military training or internal propaganda. Each figure had a function. Their positions were not chosen at random, but were likely mapped with the precision of a tactician. This was a battlefield in suspended animation. The angle of a soldier's stance, the angles of their arms, and even the rounded positions of their fingers became the focus of scholarly investigation. With these focuses came subtle, sometimes even marked, differences. The army was not a mass, it was an organism. The armor was decorated with ridges and symbols, possibly representing rank, unit, or regiment. Slight hairstyles that varied depending on the perceived region of the figure or perceived social status.
So these warriors are all life-sized, like real soldiers. Also, they have different facial features. You can tell from their hairstyle.
There were even angularities pertaining to how the feet were placed. Forward for advance, staggered for command, wide set for strength. These variations were not just a matter of artistic license. They were elements in a living system. The clay used for molding the warriors was not uniform either. Soils have shown slight differences in composition from pit to pit, and even among different figures from the same formation. This suggests variations in time of production, and perhaps the use of different workshops or regions of origin. The emperor surely didn't hire a single team to carve thousands of cookie-cutter soldiers. He had built an industrial-scale operation with layers of specialization, supervision, and accountability. The Terracotta Army is a mausoleum in stone. It is a ghostly reflection of the realm governed by Qin Shi Huang, where order and centralization were valued above all. The Terracotta Army was a reiteration of the emperor's rule, a seldom-seen immortality of his reign inscribed onto thousands of faces, weapons, and formations. This too was to serve, no doubt, as a protection from demise, as an eternal echo of the world shaped by him through conquest and decrees. Not only were warriors accommodated, chariots and horses, even weapon racks, were built to scale and arranged in accordance with known logistical strategies. Bronze swords were slanted for a quick draw, crossbows plainly accessible. Some figures were placed near supply carts or command tents, implying that entire logistics chains were sculptured into the earth. The deeper the excavations traveling in two senses, the more apparent the Terracotta Army is seen to be less a piece of art than a three-dimensional schematic of power, discipline, and warfare. It is the deaf and dumb embodiment of Qin Shi Huang's empire, every part there with a purpose. And if this was a system, then it begs one unsettling question. What larger machine lies beneath, still hidden, untouched, and perfectly engineered for control even in death? What the government won't unseal. Towering silently in the heart of the Terracotta Army's burial complex is a mysterious mound. Grassy, smooth, and entirely off-limits. While thousands of warriors have been unearthed from surrounding pits, the central tomb of Qin Shi Huang, China's first emperor, remains completely sealed. Despite 21st century technology capable of revealing deep underground chambers and scanning structures without breaking ground, the most important part of this ancient site has never been opened. And according to the Chinese government, it won't be, not yet. Officially, the reason is preservation. Archaeologists and government cultural officials argue that current methods are not advanced enough to excavate the tomb without potentially destroying everything inside. This concern isn't unfounded. When the terracotta warriors were first uncovered in the 1970s, many of them were originally painted in vibrant hues, reds, blues, and golds. Within minutes of exposure to air, those paints began to flake and fade. The rapid deterioration of their color was irreversible. Experts fear the same, or worse, could happen inside the emperor's chamber. Modern radar has mapped the interior layout of the tomb. Beneath the hill lies a sprawling chamber system, complete with walls, corridors, and what appears to be artificial landscapes. Ancient texts describe palaces, miniature cities, and detailed maps of the empire carved into the stone. Rivers of mercury were supposedly created to mimic China's great waterways. These tales were once dismissed as mythology, but scientific testing has changed that. Soil samples from the tomb's perimeter have revealed shockingly high mercury levels, far above any naturally occurring concentration. This suggests the rivers weren't metaphors. They were real, toxic, and possibly still intact. So if we know where it is, and even what's likely inside, why not open it? That's where the speculation begins. While China's official stance is clear, not until we can guarantee full preservation, a growing number of voices in the global archaeological community question whether that's the whole story. After all, this is not just any tomb. It is the final resting place of one of the most powerful and paranoid rulers in human history. A man who unified warring states, standardized laws and weights, and built a bureaucracy that still echoes in China today. Ancient historian Sima Qian informs, Qin Shi Huang's tomb served more than just a burial place. It was designed to be a fortress, intended to repel intruders even in death. His writings describe traps, crossbows rigged to fire at anyone who entered the place, and mechanisms buried deep in the walls to capture and slay looters. Some researchers wonder whether these would actually threaten modern authorities, not only archaeologists, but the site itself. Most likely because one wrong move of destabilizing pressure changes in the chamber, it can collapse or become contaminated. And here is the darker theory, moving from science into politics. Perhaps inside this tomb is evidence that the Chinese government does not want to be seen by the rest of the world. Perhaps a relic, a writing, or a revelation that might run against the dominant national narrative concerning China's origins, or even its early unification. Though these claims have little evidence to back them up, the suspense and consistent refusal to open this site to excavation have kept conspiracy theories alive for decades. And there is a practical reason: tourism. The unanswered question of the unopened tomb obviously attracts a lot of public interest. People come to wonder what might be above ground, knowing something much greater lies below. The mystery remains as long as the tomb remains sealed. In that mystery dwells the power. And still, the question lingers. What could be so volatile, so sacred, or so dangerous, that for over 2,000 years, no one has dared to open the emperor's door? A commander with no precedent. For decades, the Terracotta Army stood as a mysterious monument to the ambitions of China's first emperor. Thousands of figures, infantrymen, archers, charioteers, stood in rows across massive pits, their expressions frozen in time. But in the final days of 2024, archaeologists unearthed a single figure that immediately challenged everything they thought they knew. It wasn't just another soldier or a variant of a known rank. This was something altogether new, a commander unlike any previously discovered. And with him came a cascade of questions that remain unanswered. Excavated from Pit 2, already associated with cavalry and specialized flanking units, the figure was at first only partially visible. The upper half was distinct, striking even. He wore armor that shimmered with pigment traces, once brightly painted. His face, unlike the typical calm or resolute expressions seen in most warriors, showed something more: urgency, authority, command. The posture itself was subtly powerful, with one arm raised higher than the other, as though issuing an order or signaling troops in motion. When the lower half was unearthed in early 2025, the puzzle grew more complex. His stance, the details of his footwear, even the curvature of his spine, all pointed to a level of sculptural intent that defied prior assumptions. He wasn't made from a standard mold. He wasn't a symbolic placeholder. He was a representation of someone, possibly a real commander, possibly a man who stood close to Qin Shi Huang himself.
Each individual painstakingly handcrafted and ready for battle. It's a military force of thousands, created to escort the founding father of the Chinese Empire into eternity.
What shook researchers most wasn't simply the technical artistry. It was the implications. For years, the consensus was that the Terracotta Army was a mixture of uniformity and personalization. Bodies were mass-produced. Heads were individualized. A few elite figures, generals and officers, had been found before, but even they followed known sculptural codes. Layered armor, formal stances, established placements. This new figure violated that code entirely. The armor was unique. It bore raised ridges not seen on other figures. Some believed these ridges might represent rank designations or affiliations to specific military units. His weapon fragments, found nearby, were more intricate than the standard bronze tools given to infantry. His proximity to two damaged chariots also suggested a different operational role, possibly mobile command. But most compelling was his placement, slightly behind, but offset from a cluster of cavalry troops, as if overseeing and directing them. This opened an entirely new avenue of inquiry. Could it be that the Terracotta Army served more than just as a symbolic defense in the afterlife? Could it have been an actual replica of Qin Shi Huang's military chain of command in the real world? If so, this commander figure may not have been an abstract representation, but instead a portrait of a real commander, one who held real power in life and was now immortalized in clay to serve in death. Some scholars state that the attention to detail given to this figure, from the veins in the forearms to the twists in the top knot of the hair, would suggest an early form of political commemoration. If it were indeed a state portrait, this could make the Terracotta Army the earliest known example of individualized state propaganda in sculpture making. Not just art, but actual propaganda. Some went as far as predicting that the new revelation was going to turn the entire narrative concerning the Terracotta Army, not just being a bulk exhibition of the imperial power, but possibly a coded arrangement of an actual military establishment, with rank, division, strategy, and personality. The sculptural net might start with the central node of the commander that scholars are only beginning to understand: prompt and ready museums. From the first international display of the figure at the Bowers Museum in California, curators changed their exhibition language to address the figure now not as an officer. He was now known as the commander, an outlier, a game changer. Interpretive placards urged visitors to consider the meaning when art crosses into memory and when memory becomes history. The more researchers study the figure, the likelihood of revealing more secrets might eventually emerge. In the clay folds of his armor, in the pigment residue, in his very posture. At this point, however, one fact is certain. This was no ordinary warrior. This was a commander without precedent, and his presence demands we rewrite the story of the Terracotta Army. The message that took 2,000 years. The Terracotta Army has always been more than a collection of ancient sculptures. It's a statement carved in silence, layered with meaning, and buried so deliberately that only time and patience could ever bring its true message to light. For centuries, it stood hidden, its existence forgotten, until a group of farmers stumbled upon it by accident in 1974. But now, with the discovery of a previously unknown commander, scholars believe that the message buried with Qin Shi Huang's army is finally beginning to reveal itself. And it's not what anyone expected. This isn't just about statues arranged in a grand funerary display. The Terracotta Army is increasingly being viewed as a coded blueprint of Qin Shi Huang's worldview, an ideological and strategic representation of an empire designed to last beyond death. Every figure, every piece of armor, every object's placement seems to be part of a vast, methodical structure. What once looked like impressive ancient craftsmanship now appears more like a master plan, carefully calculated and filled with symbols meant to communicate long after the emperor was gone. The newly discovered commander has added fresh urgency to this interpretation. His presence in the second pit, thought to represent the flanks and auxiliary forces, reframes the entire site. His detail, posture, and implied authority suggest that every figure may have held more than aesthetic value. They held roles, perhaps names, perhaps even stories. The diversity of facial expressions, once believed to be the result of artisans' experimentation, now hints at something deeper: intentional individuality, memorialization, and a layered narrative of power and loyalty. But the message goes even further than the soldiers. A direct refutation of the central burial mound, which is the final resting place of Qin Shi Huang, still sealed and untouched. The official decision not to excavate, in the name of preservation, has only seeded deeper speculation. If the Terracotta Army is as elaborate and deliberate as we suspect, What might lie inside the emperor's chamber? What message was buried so painstakingly that even 2 millennia later, we are just beginning to decipher it? Historical accounts written by Sima Qian, a court historian, warn of automatic crossbows firing, walls with traps built into them, and rivers of mercury flowing through a miniature landscape inside the tomb. Most dismissed these accounts as legends until modern scans detected abnormally high levels of mercury in the soil around it. What had seemed like a myth is suddenly scientifically probable. The tomb, it seems, was not just originally meant to house a dead emperor, but to be a sealed world. One, perhaps engineered to outlast civilizations. One that was never meant to be opened. This raises a larger issue. What kind of a message could one possibly bury with such effort for nobody to read? Perhaps the answer lies in Qin Shi Huang's desire to prove immortal, his body, and his reign. He never placed faith in how time would remember him. He would not allow historians to write his legacy. Instead, he tried to carve it into the earth itself, built to survive indeed ages of conquest, rebellion, natural disaster, and forgetfulness. For posterity, he wanted future generations to excavate the soil and marvel at what he had left behind. If this discovery shook what you thought you knew about ancient history, hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Do you think the tomb should be opened, or are there some secrets too dangerous to unearth? And don't miss our next video, where we dive into another ancient mystery that may not be as dead as it seems.